Hi, I'm Liam Daly,
And I'm Ryan Butler.
and our book that we chose was called Going After Cacciato by Tim O'Brien. A brief summary of the book is it follows our protagonist is a man named Paul Berlin, who is a soldier in the Vietnam War, and basically him and his company are sent on a mission to go catch one of their soldiers that had run to go to Paris, Cacciato, who decided he was going to flee from Vietnam to Paris to escape the war. So their mission, and essentially the plot that the entire story follows, is them trying to catch Cacciato as he flees to Paris.
Throughout the book, Paul Berlin recounts the various deaths that he has witnessed of his fellow soldiers, and Tim O'Brien uses this as a way to make the horrors of the Vietnam War really come to life and be more prevalent and show how it can affect this character.
The ending of the book blurs the lines between reality and fiction, as it's revealed that Cacciato was actually dead from the beginning when Paul Berlin himself shot him, and the entire book is pretty much a story that Paul Berlin has been making up to try to escape the true reality and horrors of war that face him in a way of just escaping the trauma.
I believe that this book, Going After Cacciato by Tim O'Brien, should be read by college students because it tackles some very difficult and tough topics. And it's also written by a veteran of the Vietnam War, so it gives a good perspective on what it was actually like during that time. And it is and there's lots of themes of anti-war sentiment throughout the book, and it really gives a good perspective and lots of ideas of how the war really affected the soldiers that were in it.
Does this book have literary merit? Well, literary merit is essentially, can this book be perceived as art, or does it have does it have excellent storytelling or things that are profound enough in it that can be perceived as art? And I would say that this book does, as it gives a very, as Ryan said, interesting and unique take on the Vietnam War that I haven't really seen anywhere else, because of course it's not only an anti-war book, but it also really, really well shows just the terrible nature of the war itself. And not only that, but at the end, as I mentioned, it all turns out to be a story that Paul Berlin himself was making up to escape the horrors of war. And I think that ending is just, it really sticks with you, because you go through this whole book just to find out that it was all some way of somebody trying to escape the actual reality of war, which is honestly kind of a horrifying sentiment when you think about it. And that's also another reason why I think maybe college students should read this book, because it just sticks with you so long after you read it.
Yeah, I think that it really does stick with you after you read it because of the very difficult and hard topics that it dives into, especially with the lots of deaths that Paul Berlin brings up throughout the book, like watching his fellow soldiers die in pretty horrific ways. And it really just covers how that can break you mentally.
Yeah, and I remember one day in class, Ryan, you mentioned to me you didn't really like the ending of the book, and I think that's kind of the point. The point of the book is not necessarily that you're supposed to like it, but that you're supposed to feel something, and I think that's why it really matters, because at the end of the day, if we're saying that this book has literary merit, then in some ways it's art, and art is subjective, and art's supposed to make you feel things, and this book definitely makes you feel things when you read it. And it's a cool adventure, but at the same time, it's a very terrifying book when you think about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that there's lots of ways that you can interpret it, and it's very open-ended and kind of hazy and blurry, which helps give you that, you can almost tell that it's not quite right at the end before that it tells you that it's all a dream. And especially after, it never explicitly says that Paul Berlin was shot Cacciato, but it's heavily implied, and there's lots of these situations where you can kind of tell what happened, but it won't explicitly tell you.
And that's another thing I think that's interesting about the book is like you're never quite sure what was really real, what was fake, if any of it was real or what, like, because it's never really explained, but the entire book is sort of hazy, and when you go back and look through it, you can tell kind of that it was like all made up, but or not necessarily all made up, but that it was blurry sort of. And I think it's just such an interesting way of writing it that really just brings this whole new perspective on how trauma can affect your perception of reality, and just writing it using war as just a vessel for conveying that message and also for conveying the anti-war sentiment is a really good it's just really good.
Yeah, I think it's a really beautiful way of writing it, and obviously it's subjective, so not everyone's going to like it or think that or interpret it that way, but I also think that's the beauty of it, that you can kind of make your own, like, you can take it however you want. Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Thank you.